if we've got to this point and live with regrets, let's make a commitment. The next part of my life, I'm not going to have regrets because I'm going to learn from what's happened and I'm going to put those lessons into action in this next stage of my life. That's what's more important because we can't undo the past. It is what it is, but we can create the future.
Welcome to the MINDTRX podcast with breakthrough ideas to live your best life possible and how to make it happen. I'm Paul Scheele, and today we will be joined by David McNally. David McNally is a globally recognized thought leader on life purpose and meaning. He's always been fascinated by human potential, the possibilities, no matter who we are or where we started in life, for soaring to new heights of achievement. David is the author of many books, including his latest, If You're Alive, Your Mission on Earth Isn't Finished, and is a producer of the award-winning documentary, The Power of Purpose. David, it is so good to see you. Thanks so much for being a part of this podcast today.
My pleasure, Paul. It's just a delight to think we're going to spend this next several minutes together, or ever long it is.
Well, I wish I could go for hours and hours because I absolutely love you and your work through the years. You and I go back to September 1980, so we have had a long history together. And I know you have received highest honors in public speaking. You have been a world traveler, and you've always presented on something that I find particularly helpful for all of us. It's the concept of purpose. And so before we get into some of your recent works and the things that you're doing today, I'd like to ask you, how did you land on the concept of purpose, of being such a passionate centerpiece for your work?
Well, it began when I woke up one morning and asked a very fundamental question. I was about 35 years of age, and I said to myself, now, why are you going to work today? It just came out of the blue. And I couldn't find an answer beyond the very pragmatic ones. Like I had 5 children, mortgages. I had all of the traditional things, but people had. But I felt that there was something really missing. Is that all there is? The old Peggy Lee refrain. And I couldn't find an answer for quite some time. But I felt that there was something more, and I needed something more deeply. I really needed it. And what happened was that by sheer coincidence on a business trip, if we can use that word coincidence, I found a book in a bookstore at the Toronto International Airport. And I didn't read it at that time. I read it when I got home. But the book was a pictorial essay about an extraordinary young Canadian who the year before had run the greatest marathon in history. And he was a cancer victim. He lost a leg. So he was running with a prosthetic device and one good leg. But it was the story of this young man compelled to raise money for cancer because of what he felt people were suffering so much from. And he ran 3,339 miles in 5 months. So I read this story, and I read it. I realized that how he was able to do that was because of the strength of his purpose, which I called the power of purpose. And I said, that's what's missing, David. You don't have a purpose. You don't know why you get up in the morning beyond doing the basics. And I realized that Terry Fox had the answer for me because he had a purpose that was beyond himself. And I think that is what's so critical. And if you look at the people the world admires, whether that be Terry, because his cancer foundation now, he passed away from the cancer, but his foundation is now has raised nearly $1 billion since
Oh,
that
wow.
time. It's an
Wow.
unbelievable thing. But when
Hmm.
you look at him and you look at the people we admire, the Mother Teresa's and Nelson Mandela's, contemporary people like Bono, why do we admire them? Well, we admire them because of they have a sense of purpose beyond themselves. In other words, they want to contribute. They want to do their best to ensure the world they entered is better than when they left. And so that's where it all began. That was the foundation.
Yeah, I remember the Terry Fox story, seeing the book and also the film that you worked very hard to produce as well. Very inspiring, and inspired by that story, you've inspired millions, I dare say, around the world to also seek a purpose. So I was curious about, I've often encountered people who have said, well, how do I find my purpose? What is there a structure, an exercise that I could do that will lead me to my purpose? I've often said it's something we discover, but I also think we discover that it's already written on us. So if somebody were to ask you that question, David, how do I find my purpose and how do I know that the one I come up with is correct? How do you counsel people on that?
Well, I endeavor to counsel them or advise them. Let's look at your purpose from a 35,000 foot level. Let's go way up there and look at your discovering your purpose as understanding that the world revolves around a principle, and that principle is the principle of contribution. So the higher purpose for all of us is to contribute. And so to find our way to contribute then becomes the exercise. So you're not looking to define the bigger purpose. The purpose is to contribute, and how do you do it? So then you go right back to who you are and what stimulates the positive feelings that you want to have when you go to work every day. And that usually comes from really diving into your gifts and talents. Because that's why they were given to you to express, diving into your gifts and talents, asking the question, what inspires me? Who inspires me? Now, that word inspires is very, very important rather than motivates, because inspire means in spirit. This is within my spirit. I'm getting my spirit involved in this, and engaging my spirit. I can be motivated to do nothing, right? I can't be inspired to do nothing.
Well, and I've often said that the word inspiration is to be breathed into. So I like that in spirit being breathed into our spirit. And it really is located somewhere here in that space of our heart as well. And motive is, a reason for taking action. And it's very different. Motivation and inspiration are quite different. And I dare say that you've probably been called a motivational speaker many
It
times.
bothers the heck out of me.
Right. I've always thought that's not my work. I'm not a motivator. But in an inspirational speaker, I really see that as who you are as well. So thank you for that. I love that way of thinking, that there are gifts and talents that we come into the world with, and it's our job to contribute those. And so what's inspiring me today to contribute that is great. And you wrote a book that was a bestseller called Even Eagles Need a Push. And so even when we do know that we have a greater purpose, it doesn't necessarily mean we're right there for it. Could you tell a little bit about the moral of that story? Even eagles need a push.
Well, yes. I mean, the title of the book, again, was inspired by circumstances that, I couldn't ever have imagined, because it came out of adversity. I had written the book, but it had a different title. If I may say, a far more uninspired title. It was called Creating Your Future. And just before I was about to publish it, a book came out with exactly the same title. So I was desperately looking for another title. Um, and what happened was, this is the true story. I was in church with my youngest daughter, who had guilted me into coming to church with her. And as I wasn't listening at all to what the priest was saying, I was floating away thinking about my book. And it took me back to a convention I'd just been at where they'd shown an animated film. And the little film was, and if you visualize it, was this mother eagle on the side of a cliff. And she's just, gently pushing her offspring towards the edge of the nest. And the offspring didn't want to go, of course, until finally off the offspring went. And into my mind came this phrase: isn't that interesting? Even eagles need a push. And I thought, wow, is that a title? And of course, that was the gift from the adversity. Yeah.
that's, that's so excellent too, because when we think about being born with all of these capabilities, gifts, talents, very often people will say, well, am I worthy to do this? I have a client who looked around the room and said, somebody should do something about this problem, but she was the only one speaking. And she realized, ooh, maybe that's me. So she picked up the mantle and has done tremendous work contributing to the world. And I love this idea that we need some kind of push from time to time. Where do you think that we find that push?
Well,
How do we receive it?
yeah, the whole notion of what you just talked about is so important. That notion of encouragement. How do we get encouraged, and how do we stay encouraged in this way? Uh, it's very. I always have to go to others who inspire me. So, and just like you were talking about a moment ago, Mother Teresa's quote that I love is that people say that what I do is just a drop. And she's not referring to herself, she's referring to the person. What I do is only a drop in the ocean. And she said, but I respond by saying, but if that drop wasn't there, there would be no ocean. So it is coming to that sense that each of us, and it's not a cliche to say each of us is truly unique. We are we have gifts and talents that others don't have. They may be similar. I remember J.B. Croft, who way back when you and I met was with 3M Corporation and in the whole area of leadership development. And he made a beautiful statement when he said, I have never met a person who could not do something better than me. But then the important addition was this: I have never met a person whom I could not do something better than he or she. So when you look at that and you look at all of the gifted and talented and even famous people out there that we just are in awe of, the truth is we can do something better than they can. And that is the work that we have to do. The creative spirit expires only when we expire. Keep that in mind.
Nice. That's lovely. Well, and that brings us really to the inspiring new work that I just found out about. I happened to catch you on a video that you had sent out and loved it. And when you sent me the next one, I said, I've got to get in touch with David. And it's the title of the book is If You're Alive, Your Mission on Earth isn't finished. And I know that you say that this was inspired from Richard Bach's book, Illusions, which is a very favorite of mine, a metaphysical book. Richard Bach was famous for an earlier work called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. And all of this is based on perennial wisdom of New Thought, ancient wisdom traditions. The great religious philosophies all share some common themes. And I know that you are convinced, as I am, that we really do have written on our hearts and minds a deeper purpose. But I'm also curious, what makes you so sure about that?
What makes me so sure about that?
Yeah.
When you mentioned Richard Bach, and that's true, that's where the title was inspired by because of a question he asked in the book Illusions. But in fact, the genesis of my belief came from when my first wife, Jo, passed away, the mother of our five children, back 22 years ago. It was a week following the funeral, and I had returned to the city in which we had grown up together and where we met and married, a place called Adelaide, Australia. And I'd returned there to do some regrouping and grieving. Although my children were in America, I wanted to be with my brothers and my father, who was alive at that time. And I was walking along the beach, and I was doing what the grief counselors tell you to do, and that is speak to your loved one. And the only problem with that, Paul, is that the grief counselors don't tell you is what happens when they answer back. Uh, so I'm walking along the beach and I just said to Jo, I said, okay, Jo, you went first. Why am I still here? And an answer came so quickly into my mind, and people can interpret this as they will, but here was the direct answer: David, because you still have work to do. I took that to mean that I still had a lot of learning and growing and contributing ahead of me. I didn't know for how much time, but ever ever since then, every morning I wake up and I say, I'm alive. My mission on earth isn't finished.
That's gorgeous. Thank you. Yeah, I do fondly remember Jo, and that loss I know was a tragedy for all. When you wrote your latest book, you wrote a book called What's Right with the World. And I just loved that chapter. Could you explain why that mindset is so important for us?
It is so easy because of the mass and consistency of the news and media today to fall into the rut of saying, "Ain't it awful?" And as
Mm-hmm.
we know, the only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth, right? To go around and remember the book, this book is written for those 60 plus, right? So, seniors, or as I like to call them, elders. We are now elders. We don't want to spend the rest of our lives in the rut of ain't it awful. So there's a shift that's very, very important. And that shift is to start saying, isn't that amazing? And then to find uh, what is amazing. So, for example, when I'm speaking, and of course I'm speaking a lot now because of the book, I tell the story of my grandson coming to me when he was 13 years of age. A grandson, I have four grandchildren, but this grandson I've been close to since he was a baby. He was 13 and he comes to me and says, I need to see your granddad. And I said, what's going on? He said, well, it's very important. I said, well, come on over. He lived close to me, sat down. I said, well, tell me, Evan, tell me the story. It says it's mom. Well, mom is my daughter, right? Kate. And he said, so I said, well, what's wrong with mom? She won't let me have a cell phone.
I love that.
So I have a decision to make. Do I support my daughter or do I support my grandson? I decided to support my daughter. So I said, Evan, I think you are a bit young to have a cell phone. You know what he said to me, Paul? He said, well, how old were you when you had your first cell phone? And I responded, 50. He had no concept that
Right.
uh, cell phones didn't exist at one point. And so, in an audience that I'm speaking to, I mean, I look around and I do a survey. I say, put your hand up if you don't have a cell phone. No hands. Every person, whether it's 100, 500, no hands go up. Everyone has a cell phone. So amazing things are happening every day. Our challenge, though, is, Paul, is we take them for granted. That is the biggest issue we face. We take so much for granted. And that is the way we go from ain't it awful to ain't it amazing, to go through and do an inventory of what is actually amazing.
I remember asking questions of our digital native children and grandchildren. And I always ask them, what was the first technology you remember interacting with? And it's wonderful to hear the stories that are told. Yeah, how can you recognize that automobiles weren't around forever and that aircraft, exotic metal aircraft with jet engines, haven't been around forever, right? Especially if you were born into an age when all of it was so available. So the idea of not taking something for granted, I say every mundane experience is made sacred when we recognize that moment, when we pour ourselves fully into it. You use the word courage, encouragement, meaning in French, en courage, being filled with heart, cour, and courage, being filled with heart, filling our heart with encouraging thoughts and ideas. I think that's something you have found as a gift of yours to share with people. And I know that so many people, David, wonder or struggle with self-acceptance, not being enough, or I've done something terrible in my life and I just can't forgive myself for it. I just can't live with myself and my errors. What do you do or what do you say to get people back on track, to recognizing or encouraging them to live in the now and for a future that they can create rather than the past that seems to be keeping them so stuck?
You've hit something that is so important, especially as we get older. The whole notion of acceptance, whether that's self-acceptance or acceptance of the realities that are around us, and to accept them for what they are, not for what they could be, for what they are. And our own self-acceptance is so important. So it is a process, and forgiveness is, of course, key to that. I know I've been through that experience myself. But if you have a spiritual belief, so you know if you believe in a God, and you realize that God is despite, of course, some of our upbringings where that is a conditional God. My God is an unconditional God. So if that's an unconditional God, then what correlates with that, it has to be, then my God is unconditional forgiveness. So no matter where we are in that, and this of course is one's belief system, is that we come to that point that I've done things that I regret tremendously in my past. There's no question about it. But what I got to was the fact that if I haven't forgiven myself, then I have to realize that it's me that's holding back on that forgiveness. It's not God. God is forgiven. Hey, God's saying, David, move on, let go. And also, Paul, is to realization that we all have done things that we're not proud of. There is nothing that's not forgivable. And so to read the stories of people who've forgiven others, parents who visit the murderer of their child in jails and prisons, people who have been tortured and have relationships with their tortured. I mean, these extreme examples. I cannot recommend more. People Google the Forgiveness Project. It's out of the UK. I write about it in my book. It's an amazing organization with the most incredible stories. But to get to that self-acceptance, yes, I'm not proud of what I did, but I am who I am. And here's why. If we've got to this point and lived with regrets, let's make a commitment. The next part of my life, I'm not going to have regrets because I'm going to learn from what's happened and I'm going to put those lessons into action in this next stage of my life. That's what's more important because we can't undo the past. It is what it is, but we can create the future.
Gorgeous. And I know we're at a stage in our lives where the road that got us here was a lot longer than the road that is ahead of us still. So it is a nice, very refreshing idea, David, that we could stop the awfulizing, stop the living with regret, stop the feeling stuck or unworthy as a result, and stop disqualifying ourselves from the massive contribution that we really could make. So thank you for that. It's beautiful. You wrote in your book, to live meaningfully, human beings need a sense of purpose and the willingness to continually learn and grow. In our later years, this translates into discovering ways to contribute value to the world and ensuring that the landscape of our lives is an expression of a vivid imagination. And I love that from your book. And I'm wondering, you probably encounter a lot of elders who say, well, no, I mean, the expression of my life was brought me to here, but that's over. All I see ahead of me is another round of golf and maybe another day in the boat. What do you do to help them see that their contribution is really possible still?
I like to describe it this way. We live life on a feeling level.
Mm-hmm.
We want to feel good about life. We know that from our health. We want to feel healthy, but we also want to feel that life is worth living. And so we need to have the willingness to take a look at, well, what makes life worth living? I love to play golf and I love a martini, but one round of golf and one martini is enough for me. And thank God it is, right? So I need more, and we all need more to feel fulfilled and believe that life is worthwhile. So as we get older, this is a fantastic time, and this is what the book is about, of course, to reinvent ourselves, to discover passions that we never knew we had, or discover old passions that we put aside because we live someone else's life and not our own life, right? Every day, Paul, whether people understand it, we are creating. We are creating our lives. And the march of humanity is the march of consistent creation. So when I wake up in the morning, of course, I don't have anyone, my second wife passed away as well, as you know. So I don't have anyone to wake up with in the morning at home, but we create our relationships if we have a partner or a loved one from the way we interact with them. We create the relationships we have with people we meet on a day-to-day basis. And then we create, like a friend of mine who decided in his 70s to learn to play the piano. Because he said, that's what I've wanted to do all of my life, you know. Now play Hey Jude, and he thinks this is fantastic. I have to keep warning him that he's not quite ready to play with Paul McCartney yet, you know, but I still try to encourage him. Yeah.
Well, you do refer to what you call purposeful practices that we could engage in each day. And I'd like to ask for our listener, what practice, ritual, or behavior do you engage in daily or regularly that helps contribute to your sense of well-being, your feeling of keeping life meaningful?
What is, I think, very important for me to communicate is that although I've written all of these books and I've been in this field for over 40 years, I cannot escape, or I'm not immune to what I call bully thoughts, the thoughts that want to bully you, especially the thoughts that come up at night, the thoughts of worries and concerns, whether that be your family or whether it be your finances, whatever it might be, the bully thoughts that occur. And so I've had a practice for over 40 years where I make sure that the first thing I do every morning is clean out those bully thoughts. All right, banish the bullies. That's my process every morning. So often I can spend, and people say I don't have that much time. Well, I'll leave that to them. But I can spend up to an hour, and it's always first thing in the morning. So it's very ritualistic. I have, and now it's winter time. Have a fireplace. I light a candle, and I have several readings that I do every day, and I journal. So one of the ways I can dump out the bully thoughts is to journal and then describe in that journal how I want my day to unfold as best as I can control it. And of course, there are so much is uncontrollable. But yes, I've had that practice and it has served me well. It allows me to get to that place where when I step away from there, I have the impetus, the inspiration to tackle whatever that day is going to bring me.
Gorgeous. And everyone that I have interviewed, if I ask them, do you have a daily ritual? They say, absolutely. And yours is very similar to mine, with the exception you have tea, I have coffee, and I light the gas fireplace, but not a candle. So I get it. It's very, very helpful. Well, before we finish up, David, could you tell us a bit about your work on the with the inspired elder? I'm a big fan of eldering. I've been into it for quite a while, understand the importance. A friend, Chip Connolly, has developed the Elder Institute. I know that this is a big movement for us graying baby boomers. But what is your work in the inspired elder?
It really begins with a belief, and I will go back to part of our conversation, that elders have so much to contribute, but also I believe that they have a responsibility. There's a wonderful show on PBS called Finding Your Roots. And when you watch that show, they take a couple of well-known personalities because they need to get the ratings and that, but they take them back into their history. And many of us may know our grandparents, but we vague idea of our great grandparents. And then beyond that, we probably don't know who is out there, right? So the show takes them back into their ancestry. There is a key finding with so many of the guests, and that is this: if it wasn't for what they did, my ancestors, I wouldn't have the opportunities that I have today. If they didn't make those sacrifices. So the statement that we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us is a very important statement. And that, I believe, is the elders' responsibility. So I see my work is about twofold. One is to inspire elders to say, hey, you've got a lot of living to do, a lot of fun to have, a lot of creation, but also much to contribute. So, be ready to pass on that wisdom, to pass it on to the young people, to encourage their dreams, all of those things. That's what we're here for. And take your place in that part of the world.
Nice, gorgeous. And I'm also thinking of how I inspire anybody, whatever their age is are you setting your future self up to say thank you for what you did today? And how can we make our own lives much easier in addition to those that we serve as a result of our actions today? So thank you very much, David. This has been fabulous. We could go on and on and on, but I do want to ask for perhaps a parting inspiring thought. I wrote down dozens of them from your book. The book is gorgeous. Thank you for producing it. Would you leave our listener with a final thought for our session today?
I'm going to quote from somebody else, but it's a quote I use both in my book and The Inspired Elder. She's one of my favorite inspirers. She's the award-winning choreographer Twyla Tharp, and she's in her 80s, and she says, age is not the enemy. Stagnation is the enemy.
Nice. Keep growing. Keep sharing, keep contributing. David, thank you so much for being a part of this. It's been my absolute pleasure to be with you.
Great to be with you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with David McNally. You can learn more about David at www.davidmcnally.com. And now in the second part of the podcast, it's just you and me. I'll tell you how to use the Paraliminal sessions in the MINDTRX app to easily handle obstacles and move toward the success you want, especially as it relates to David's message. If you're new to the relaxing Paraliminal audio sessions, they use breakthrough technologies to activate your whole mind in only 20 minutes to help improve any area of your life. Let's get going. Hi, and welcome back. This is the follow-on to my dialogue with David McNally. What a joy for me. It's been a long time since I've seen him. There's so many interesting things that he's been up to. I hope you found value in what it was that he was sharing. Now, to give you additional value, to go deep on these principles that we've been talking about, I've identified 5 different areas that were relevant from my conversation with David. And I'd like to offer paraliminals that could assist you in each of these areas. So the 5 areas are finding your purpose, forgiving your past, encouraging yourself, meaningful living, and daily rituals. So on the idea of finding your purpose, I think he gave us a lot of really good ideas. And I also have 2 paraliminals that could be extremely valuable in this. The first one is called Finding Yourself, where what we're actually doing is we're starting in our now moment and we're going back through our past to see the arc or the trajectory of our lives. In a way, speaking to what David talked about, is getting the 35,000-foot view of our life expanse. So very cool idea. Super powerful paraliminal. The second one is self-actualization, because it's looking at, okay, you have your basic needs met now. where do you go from there? What is your highest expression? What are the peak experiences that you're going for in your lifetime? Next up is the idea of forgiving your past. David did quite a lot to talk about those unforgivable things and deep regrets that he has. I also have had plenty of those in my life. How do we process those? How do we come into the present moment, letting go of those bully thoughts that are beating us up with regrets or shame or guilt or whatever it might be from our past, which is over, right? It's over. So 2 paraliminals that can help a lot. First one is called New History Generator, where you actually get to look at your life from a number of different perspectives and then decide, where does your life go from here? New History Generator, super powerful. It's got 2 sides to it. The second paraliminal is called No Matter What, which I did with Lisa Nichols. And it's the idea that very often what we do is we discount ourselves because of our failed history and don't give ourselves permission to have a second chance at life. And this is about 1,000 second chances. And once you get to 999 offerings of a second chance that you gave yourself, you get another 1,000. So it's about you're living your life full out no matter what. It's really lovely, very supportive and encouraging. And that gets to our next idea, which is, how do we encourage ourselves? Living wholeheartedly with encouragement. How do we live fully from our heart? And one of the paraliminals that I've done a lot with over the years, and a very important idea is the coaching session that goes along with it. If you have the MINDTRX app, this is an opportunity to listen to that one. I really hope that you will. It's called Self-Esteem Supercharger. The Self-Esteem Supercharger makes a distinction between self-esteem, which is loving yourself just for your being, versus self-image, which is projecting an idea of who you think you should be out in front of you. And that's a comparison between you and others. Self-esteem is your relationship with yourself without any reference to others. So it's really a powerful pivot in terms of how we relate to who we believe we are. The second one, again, is a Lisa Nichols collaboration called You Deserve It. So it really is encouraging about living your life from the position of, yes, you deserve to live a life of meaning and purpose. Go for it. That leads us to the next idea, which is meaningful living, right? And there are 2 paraliminals I recommend here as well. One is called Success Built to Last, where you are choosing to pursue something that's truly meaningful and valuable to you and living that each day. And even if you do it badly, you're getting better at doing something which matters to you. So it's about building a life of enduring success, a life of value. And I did this with the author of the book, Success Built to Last, Stuart Emery. Great paraliminal. The next one, this might be a surprise. It's called Happy Money. Happy Money I created with Ken Honda. And his book, Happy Money, isn't just about finances. It's based on concepts from Lynn Twist's Soul of Money, which Lynn and I also created a paraliminal on. But Happy Money is about building a reservoir from which the overflow is a contribution to the rest of the world. It's quite lovely. It's a powerful idea. And it's a way of rethinking the sufficiency of our lives. What is it that we really need? And once we recognize that we are living sufficiently, then how do we give or support others from that? And as David said in our dialogue, the one given about our human existence is that we are here to live lives of contribution to humanity, contribution to the planet, right? So think about that. Happy money. I know it sounds like an odd one to put here, but it really is cool. And the final area is the concept of daily rituals. What is a daily ritual that can support you in living a meaningful life, a purpose-driven life, a life of contribution? And from this, we have two paraliminals, one called self-discipline, where you follow or are a disciple of what it is that matters most to you. What is the discipline of living your life? Discipline, ritual, training our inclination, our habits, are our living lives meaningfully and masterfully. So self-discipline is a great one to really think into, how do I want to live this day? And finally, a paraliminal that really lets us look at what is the true value of living this life, and it is the paraliminal joy. How can you bring more joy, more of your true passion for this life into your everyday experience? So that's it. A bunch of paraliminals, 5 different areas. Do go to ones that seem to resonate for you. And remember, there's a description, and for all of the paraliminals, an additional video that can go along with it. So check it out, dive deep, dig into it, and find your true purpose and passion in living life today. Thanks so much for being here. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me today. I applaud your willingness to maximize your potential. You can easily use the paraliminal audio sessions in the MINDTRX app to stimulate your non-conscious mind, that is, your inner mind, to reduce any resistance in your life and to propel you toward the success you want. Go to www.mindtrx.com/go. These amazing audio tools have helped millions, and I encourage you to bring them into your world today. Be sure to be back for more episodes of the MINDTRX podcast. You'll find insightful conversations with authors, experts, and thought leaders, all devoted to improving your life's experience. Thank you again for being here on our MINDTRX podcast.